I just had eggs and avocado.
Yeah, let me see. Oh no. Let me see the top. Oh, get my notes.
If
This was a tough one. Tough one.
Welcome back to Life Lessons in Film. And today we're going to be making sense of life through Interstellar. Plot. Brief. It follows the main character named Cooper. Cooper was an engineer and pilot for NASA, but in his last voyage, he conked out and he never flew again. He decided to just focus on farming. It takes place in the States about a couple decades in the future when this plague, this pestilence called blight, is starting to destroy all the crops around the world. The world is running out of food. They've scrapped basically worrying about going to space or really any technology stuff. And they're just trying to get everyone to make as much food as possible because food is growing less and less.
It follows these Cooper and other people that work, scientists or astronauts that work for NASA, trying to find a different world for human beings because Earth is currently
starting to become uninhabitable.
Yeah. And that's basically the movie. However, there's much more to it than that. And it is very complicated. It was the first time for me watching it. And it was a couple of times for him. And I feel like I still need a little bit more.
Yeah. I'd be down to rewatch it.
Yeah, I definitely feel that way. However, after the first take, I would say, for me, I feel like there were a lot of religious, spiritual themes to the movie. I feel like a lot of the things that Nolan depicts in the movie can be interpreted along the lines of having faith in something beyond anything that is tangible and something beyond yourself. Because when you look at these people that are looking for another world for human beings, every single thing that they do ultimately requires more their faith in something that they aren't certain of, their faith in something intangible like love versus things that you can actually touch,
quantify,
make
equations for.
Yeah, if there are any heroes versus villains, and villains here maybe being man. As much as he's talking about how he's doing everything for the greater good, for humanity's sake, but he's looking at things in a much more scientific way, very clinically looking at the future of human beings as just simply needing to live life, to be alive, versus actually living. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All of us, I find, as people, I'm breathing, all of us are here breathing, we're eating, and we're moving through the world, but are you really living?
Yeah. There's a lot of people are about extending their lifespan, but what are they doing with that extended lifespan?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you could say with, okay, they're trying to make humanity live on into the future, but what kind of life would it be?
Exactly.
And I think it is, because it's it's a space exploration movie, but it is similar to probably in a way what humans went through when they were just traveling to a distant land. They still had their instruments and their equipment, but that only took them so far. They still had to have that faith that when they got past that big mountain range, that there might be a better place for them to settle later on. So a lot of it does take a leap of faith. Most of the characters in the movie at one point take a leap of faith or just kind of put things up to chance or just, they don't really know what the outcome will be.
Back to the aspect of religions that I referenced, one of the things is with religion is it encourages altruistic love, right? Because love has lots of nuances to it, right? So you have selfish love, you have altruistic love. So selfish love is the kind of love where in the beginning, Cooper is all about, I want to go back home to, to see my kids. So it is selfish there because as much as you understand that obviously he's a father, there's much more at stake than just his kids and just his desire to see his kids.
Right.
And so in the end, he kind of embraces the fact of how altruistic love is much more important. And so that's where he's like, I'm going to, and with altruistic love, there's a lot of self-sacrificing. And you see that's what happens in the end, ultimately.
Because he could have gone back, because they said, okay, you'll have enough fuel now to get back home to Earth if you want to. And then he actually decides to go with one of their robots to go into the black hole. Yeah. He's like, we have to figure out we have to take a chance and actually help them figure out the equation to actually get them off the planet.
Yeah.
Cooper! Cooper, what are you doing? Newton's third law. You gotta leave something behind.
You told me we had enough resources for both of us.
We agreed, Amelia. 90%. Detach.
Action beyond himself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that Cooper decides this is the course I'm taking right now. And yeah, like that's where for me, when I was connecting the religious aspects of it, that's basically what it is, really. Yeah. That's the whole goal of it.
Like, I think that there was even an intention there because they talk about the Lazarus missions, which is a religious character being raised from the dead, and they're hoping to do that with the human species.
Yeah.
I hadn't a lot of hope to begin with, but after so long, I had none. My supplies were completely exhausted. The last time I went to sleep, I didn't even set a waking date. You have literally raised me from the dead.
Lazarus.
So I think there is a mix of kind of trying to reconcile, or at least, see how science and religion can kind of interact, how they can kind of help each other. You can use science to a degree, but you also need that belief in something greater than yourself. Or, I mean, even just here's all these scientists at NASA talking about this anomaly, and they are all kind of believing that there are these beings, these aliens or something looking out for them that have put this wormhole there for them to give them a shot at finding another habitable world.
A wormhole's not a naturally occurring phenomenon.
Someone placed it there.
They?
And whoever they are, they appear to be looking out for us. That wormhole lets us travel to other stars. Came along right as we needed it.
They've put potentially habitable worlds right within our reach.
So they're all already kind of at this point of I don't know, maybe someone's looking out for us, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, Dr. Brand, she's already, I guess, more into the idea of, accepting the idea that maybe there are these things we don't understand. So she's already more open-minded, but she was the most open-minded when it comes to these other beings. At one point, she thinks she shook hands with one of these fifth-dimensional beings that's making contact with them,
Yeah, you discover that there's so many dimensions and there's human beings interacting with each other to save the world across those different dimensions. Yeah. But then one thing that ties all those dimensions together is that connection that is based on love and that is based on faith. Faith in general, outside of just having that kind of, that structural element of the church, etc. Yeah. I'd say faith in general is something that I could also say is something that is depicted here in the movie, because a lot of the times people focus so much on reason. I mean, that's the whole thing with science, right? There's a whole lot of reason, and the thing with reason.
Well, and it starts off with the movie where you've got young Merv, his daughter, talking about her ghost, right? Yeah. And it's look, and she's like, oh, you broke my my kind of lander sculpture. Of a moon lander. And she's like, no, I didn't. It was my ghost. And he's like, and then, the son's like, there's no such thing as ghost, right? Yeah. And then she's like, oh, no, it's a thing. I looked it up. And then so Cooper's like, okay, well, let's be scientific about this, Yeah. Just give me your hypothesis, give me your evidence, and then you'll make your conclusion based off. So he's trying to raise her in this mentality of thinking scientifically about questioning things, right? Yeah. And then later as it goes on, I think then, it's almost a swap. He kind of starts to get more into belief and faith in things greater than himself versus her who, she kind of then, she becomes a scientist. So, I don't know, it's kind of it's a merging of both mindsets, I guess. And then, of course, and then ethics is a big part of it. They're all making these ethical decisions on how much do you lie to someone to benefit the group as a whole? How much do you tell the truth? How much should you share the whole plan, or do you how much do you keep things to yourself, and who do you let in on things, Yeah.
Hey, Tars, what's your honesty parameter?
90%.
90%.
Absolute honesty isn't always the most diplomatic, nor the safest form of communication with emotional beings.
Okay.
I like that scene with Brandon Cooper where, they're trying to decide after trying the first planet, and there was no way that they'd be able to land there and make a colony there. So they didn't have enough fuel to go to both the other possible planets, so they had to choose one. And Brand is into going to Edmund's because she's in love with Edmund, and the idea of possibly even still seeing him alive again excites her. And so she is biased in that way. She's trying to keep that from them, but Cooper picked up on that. And then because the other Dr. Mann's planet, you know, they're getting better readings. So
well,
they're like,
which turns out to be a lie.
yeah, because Mann ended up being so desperate to he got so lonely and desperate that he lost all his heroic, courageous ideals and was willing to basically do anything just to lure some other humans there,
and
so he had a chance to escape. Yeah, because he's like, the moment I got here that there was no chance.
You faked all the data.
Yes.
There's no surface.
No. I tried to do my duty, Cooper, but I knew the day that I arrived here that this place had nothing.
And then, you know, to face that fact of like, do I be honest? And then no one will come visit me.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna die here alone. Yeah. You know, he's like, don't judge me, Cooper, because I've been tested more than most people will ever get tested. To a degree, I understand where Cooper, you know, calls him a coward in that moment. And you are on Cooper's side there, because it is cowardly, but at the same time, what if Cooper was in Mann's position? Yeah. You know, it's easier for Cooper to feel like he's the brave one because he's only been there for a bit and they have a plan to get back off again. Yeah. You know? So, yeah, you never know until you're put in someone else's shoes exactly how they were put into them. But yet, going back to the debate between which planet to visit, Cooper's like, well, talking to the third astronaut, he's like, you should know before we make a decision that Brand is biased here because she's in love with Evan. That's why she's pushing for that one, even though logically it doesn't seem to add up, doesn't make sense. She's not being objective about it. Yeah. But that's where she says, yeah, okay, but like, listen to me, right? When it comes to love, like it's still such an intangible thing that science can't really explain. You know, she's like, what's the point of love? And he's like, oh, well, we've already figured that out. It's for social utility, social bonding, child rearing. Yeah. And she's like, okay, but what about caring and still remembering and being hurt by people that have passed away? Where's the social utility in that? He's like, there is none, right? So there's these things that you can't fully quantify. She's like, what draws me to, you know, travel across the galaxies to potentially see someone that I know is probably dead and I haven't seen for a decade. Yeah.
He's saying, like, and she's in that moment trying to convince him that love alone is the reason that she feels that planet is the right thing to go to.
Which in the end ended up actually being true.
Out to be, yeah.
I
was just thinking how interesting it is, you know, with Cooper when in that moment is kind of shunning Dr. Mann's idea that Dr. Brand's idea that they should go to another planet based on love. Yeah. I think it was interesting for two different things because like love is the reason that Cooper basically saves Earth ultimately. Yeah. His love for Murph, you know, their love is what connects them. Because he turns out to be the ghost that Murph thought was a ghost, right? And it was just him communicating from another dimension.
Yeah. It was me, Murph. I was your ghost.
I know. People didn't believe me. They thought that I was doing it all myself. But I knew who it was.
But I remember even before he found this space, or was it? I think it was before. He was sitting with the dad and says something like, "We used to look up at the stars for answers or something like that, and ponder about the world, and now we just
wonder about our place in the stars." Yeah,
and now we just look at the dirt or something. You should probably just like
we'll put the clip in there.
Yeah.
Well, we used to look up in the sky and wonder at our place in the stars. Now we just look down. Worry about our place in the dirt.
It was interesting to reconcile his at that moment, that kind of rejecting Dr. Brand's idea of love as being the answer.
Right.
When there were things in his past, even before going on this venture to find another world, that where he had some cognizance of the need to look beyond the world, you know, the material world. Yeah. And how important it was before, you know? Yeah. And it's kind of interesting too, because like, I think the way that that Earth is, and at that time, the Earth that now it forces people to leave. It is because of a hyper focus, I think, on the material world that people get there. And, you know, like lots of things, like maybe over farming, for example, right? Like over farming, and then you get to the point where like the soil just can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
And oh God, I forgot what other point I was trying to make.
It's all right.
Oh yeah, like over farming and getting to that point, but also where now you're here and you realize that technology, science, it doesn't matter. We need to eat, and that is that is the most basic thing. Is just like we need food. I don't need like whatever app to watch whatever. I just want to eat. You know, like the most basic things.
And you can't eat most of the things that people buy, all the luxury items. That stuff is not going to keep you alive. I think that's why that scene where Cooper goes to the parent-teacher interview and they've got the new textbooks saying that going to the moon was propaganda and everything, because they're really trying to dissuade kids from caring about space programs or wanting to be like an aerospace engineer or something like that. They're just really trying to, which is, you know, what the government decide the curriculum in schools, and they generally try to, for good or ill, maybe it's not either, but they try to steer people into what they feel like the next generation is going to be important for jobs and careers, right? I mean, I feel like coding is a big thing that's being encouraged in schools now, because I feel like that's going to be a future. A lot of people need to be doing that in the future. So in this movie, they feel like it's the other way around. We need farmers. We need farmers. So let's dismiss or kind of try to, you know, persuade people away from any of that. It's a good speech. I might just play the clip because I can't really remember it, but you know, she's like, it's love isn't something we invented.
Maybe it's some evidence, some artifact of a higher dimension that we can't consciously perceive. I'm drawn across the universe to someone I haven't seen in a decade, who I know is probably dead. Love is the one thing we're capable of perceiving that transcends dimensions of time and space.
And maybe it is, I like that she doesn't say it's its own kind of dimension, but it's some kind of relic or leftover of some kind of dimension or something that we have yet to fully understand or perceive.
Yeah.
You know?
Looking at my notes, trying to figure out, because I had to make notes.
And yeah, of course, like another big ethical one that I like is the father, Dr. Brand, Michael Caine's character, when it comes out that he's trying to solve this equation to figure out how they can use gravity to build a spaceship that can get out of Earth's orbit and take a lot of humanity off the world. He has yet to figure it out, but he's telling everyone, yeah, I'll figure it out by the time you guys do your mission. You know, plan A, you find a planet we can get to. Plan B, you got a bunch of fertilized eggs, start a new colony that way, you know, repopulate the species. But he's like, it should be all right. But really, he had figured out the equation before they even left, and he knew it was impossible. But he made the hard ethical choice to decide to make this lie, because he knew that no one would go out to do the plan B, which is just abandon their families and start a new colony of humans way out in a new galaxy, just to keep the species going. No one would do that and abandon anyone that they actually know on Earth if they knew that there was no hope to get their families off at some point. So he had to make them believe that it was possible. And then he admits that on his deathbed, which is, you know, a lot of people do, because it's hard to live with that. Because I don't think he was a bad person necessarily, but he made that decision that was the right thing to do. Now, you know, we wonder, can you give that massive species-affecting decision up to one person to decide what's right, how you should, I mean, maybe the species should just die off. Maybe that's just what should happen, you know, but he's decided for everyone else to lie to everyone else for the betterment of the species. But you know, Cooper seems to be, I mean, I think they do it partly just to help the audience understand and get caught up on relativity and how the time warping works and everything. But it seems like he's, you know, less experienced on relativity and Einstein's theories on gravity and how that affects everything versus the other scientists. And maybe that's what allows him to actually attempt what the others were deemed kind of impossible. Like, no, you can't, there's not even any point getting too close to the black hole. It'll just destroy everything, or you know, like, but he's willing to, almost out of that, it's kind of the naivete of not being an expert in something is what allows him to actually take that chance.
Yeah.
Right?
We are the way that we are. People are the way that they are. And it's okay to embrace human nature. And it's okay to live life according to the simple parts of being human, beyond trying to kind of question everything and looking for this greater understanding through science, technology, and reason as something that's going to kind of catapult us into this being this greater species.
Yeah.
Because like with this in the movie, the thing that does catapult humanity into being a greater species is the instincts, the things that it seems like right now we are trying to go against.
Yeah, the irrational.
The
love,
irrational.
the faith. The intangible.
Yeah.
Everyone's gonna handle things differently. His son, who does become a farmer, has kind of committed to staying. A couple generations have lived in that house, and a lot of people. It is a hard thing. I think it's not even necessarily an ignorant thing for people to want to stay in one place. I think it's easy to say to people like, your crops are dying, your kid is dying. Why won't you leave? Why are you still, stuck on staying here and hoping things will get better? Which is, again, is another type of faith. And it's one of those things where, like, I think the son was making the wrong decision there. But, there are other, like, it's hard to make that decision saying that you should always leave when it seems like it's not going to get better.
One thing about the son as well as, and different people in the movie, they talk about that. There's that poem, "Do not go gently into the good night," right? Like, and in the poem, there's that whole, like, people who are wise, or, I don't know, I don't remember this poem very clearly, but what I remember of it is just basically, do you remember who wrote it?
I forget, but I don't know if it's in the movie, but basically I think...
they sing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He talks about different types of people, like the wise ones, the ones that aren't so wise, etc.
Right.
And so the wise ones accept that death is imminent, or the night is imminent. The poet, he's writing about his dad and doesn't want the dad to die.
Right.
So obviously this is, it kind of, you can see the parallels between what's going on in the movie.
Right. So
in the poem, he's talking, I'm very hazy about this poem because I haven't read it in a long time, but I do remember that he's writing about his dad and saying, don't go gently into the good night. With the good night being death. And so he then talks about wise men. Wise men know that death is coming and live, number one, they live their life accordingly, but also do their best to prolong that eventuality. Truly living is good. Truly living is fruitful, not for yourself, but like also the people around you. But then there are other men who, they live very kind of like callously. They only see the end when it's too late. You know what I mean? So you're kind of like moving through life without the understanding or realization that you don't have a lot of time here. But then it's only at the end when you see that, oh no, it's the end. And then you're not, but the whole time you weren't really preparing for it. You weren't living, like you weren't really present in your existence. And you weren't really making choices that really speak to the reality of what is coming, what is inevitable. So you do see different people there who have that understanding, who are living their lives in the present based on their understanding, based on their wisdom of what is coming, and therefore like why it is important to work hard and to fight. And so I think those are the kinds of things
and Jesse, the son, is that kind of person that really isn't thinking about that. He's just not ignoring the fact that his kids are dying and he just wants to live with his head in the sand and the dirt, right? And then the sister makes another ethical decision to burn basically the rest of their crop, which is probably pretty vital at this point to have any crop left over, decides to burn it so it's a distraction to give her enough time to go back and try and figure out the last piece of what really was the ghost that was trying to communicate to me. And then that's when she's able to figure out the equation, because Cooper at that point is able to communicate basically how the gravitational equation bit that she needs to save humanity. But that was also a huge risk that she took too.
Yeah,
right?
but that's what she's doing, right? She's fighting till
raging into the
exactly.
She's not going gently into the good night. Rage against the dying of the light.
Exactly. But yeah, like this movie was really, really interesting.
I know that we've missed a bunch of stuff.
For sure.
It's impossible to cover it all.
It's tough.
We'd
it's
have
really
to do
tough.
a 10-hour video. That's some of the stuff that we tried to comprehend from Interstellar, but what did you guys think?
Comment down
stuff
below.
That you noticed? Yeah,
and share your thoughts on our thoughts.
Yes, please.
Or just share any thoughts on this, because we
we
would love some enlightenment.
We were trying our best to make things coherent for ourselves and for you. But till next time though, right? Yeah. How you feeling? I'm feeling good.
I'm feeling good.
It's a little hot actually. All right, till next time though. Bye. That's a wrap.